Well, hello, my name is Casey Sixkiller, and I am very excited to have an opportunity to chat with you today about my campaign to be Seattle's next mayor. For those of you that don't know me, I was born and raised here in Seattle and then did a tour of duty on the East Coast. I went to Dartmouth College and ended up in Washington, D.C., working for then Congressman Jim McDermott and later Senator Patty Murray, and working for my tribe and owning my own business in between all of those things. And came home a few years ago to become the Chief Operating Officer of King County alongside Dale Constantine, where I manage the day-to-day of one of the largest counties in the United States. And then early last year or early of 2020, had an opportunity to come to the city and serve as deputy mayor for Mayor Durkin. Little did I know the challenges that we would see collectively as a community throughout 2020. It's one of the reasons I'm running for mayor. You know, as someone who grew up in this city, I have a great, deep love for our city, for our neighborhoods, for the people who choose to call this home. And the fact of the matter is, our city is a mess. We are facing so many challenges, whether it's public safety, homelessness, the business climate that's not, I think, conducive to businesses wanting to stay in Seattle. And I think it's too difficult for businesses to be able to grow in Seattle today. To just meeting the basic needs of our residents. And, I think one of the things that we need to do a better job of is focusing our policy decisions and the direction that we're trying to take the city is just being very focused on the daily experience. What are the things that you experience as a resident or a business owner every time you walk out your front door or you show up or fire up your computer to actually engage in your work? And that means we'd have to have transit that's frequent and reliable. That means we need to have neighborhoods that are thriving, have all of the different pieces that make up a thriving neighborhood, whether that's, access to childcare, grocery stores, libraries, small businesses that are keeping folks employed and allowing us to continue to buy local, which we've done such a great job of over the past year. It also means we have to deal with some of the bigger challenges facing our city, public safety being at the top of the list. The fact of the matter is, so many of our residents today don't feel safe in Seattle anymore. And our data shows that. Crime statistics are up across the city. We're down 300 cops. Our 911 response time, it's not what it needs to be. It's almost double what it was just a year ago. And so, we really have an opportunity here as we apply the lessons from the past year and we begin the transition, the future of the Seattle Police Department and how we conduct public safety. Hiring back those 300 officers is a huge opportunity for us to literally hire officers who match our values as a city and begin that transformation to more constitutional policing in Seattle. Homelessness, I'm sure we'll talk more about that through the course of this conversation, but we need to get back to the basics. We need to remember who we are as a city. We are super innovative. We are culturally diverse. And when we put those two things together, Seattle has always been a place that can meet its challenges. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk about that with you today, and just as excited to try to apply that to leading the city over the next 4 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Casey. We're really happy to have you with us today. Our first question on the list today is, what do you plan to do in your first 100 days as mayor? What are the immediate actions that you will use your executive authority on? And what will be your first priorities in working with the city council?
Well, the first 100 days is a super critical time, right? It sets the tone and tenor for the entire 4-year period. As I said, number one, it's getting back to the basics. The first 100 days at my administration, we're going to focus on getting every single tent out of every park across the city. Number two is we're going to initiate the process of hiring our next chief of police. Number three, we're going to create a big table with business to come in and talk about what are the things that we need to do as a city to both make it easier to operate and own a small business in this city, as well as find ways to connect people to businesses, create career pathways so that all residents have an opportunity to earn a living that allows them to continue to call Seattle home. The fourth thing is we gotta figure out a way for the executive branch and the legislative branch to actually work together. And we don't have to agree on everything, but we have to agree on some of the core things and get to work. And I think, electing me is going to send a very clear message to the city council that residents are not okay with the status quo. They don't want us to have this divisive relationship. So day one for me is going downstairs to where the city council offices are and having a conversation about just that. What are we going to work on together? Let's build from that and show our residents and small business owners that we actually can have a functioning city that we're all proud of.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you've said throughout the campaign that Gadugi, the communities coming together to solve problems, is that central value of your campaign. And that's what you just talked about there. The last several years, we've seen a lot of conflict between the mayor's office, the city council, other parts of city government. What specific ways will you work to change the tenor of that conversation that's so heated right now?
Well, it's such a great question because, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time. And, one of the reasons that I moved home a few years ago with 3 kids in tow was because I was tired of the divisive politics of our national politics. Little did I know what I was coming back home to was just a microcosm, I think, of that division. And look, Seattle is very divided right now. And I think what we need is our elected leaders to sort of find a way to work through and through that and put aside semantics and just focus on the work. Look, when we're talking about a city, it's a municipal corporation. Our job is to ensure that we are providing those essential and basic services to all of our residents. That's not political. Somehow we found a way to make it political, but I just really don't think that's where we are as a city. So again, I really do think some of it is as simple as just reminding each other, especially as electeds, that we got to get that right. We get those basics right, then we can move on to all of the other issues that are ancillary to those challenges that we're seeing as the city. But I have to tell you, in doing this work for 20 years, I've never been an elected official, but I certainly have been around elected officials and involved in public policy at 3 levels of government for 2 decades. Finding those things that we have in common and using that as a foundation to build and either to build or rebuild trust and relationships gives us the platform to move on to other topics. And I think we have just got to quit chasing headlines and just be focused on getting back to those basics. And I'm telling you, I know it's possible. I will also just say this, I grew up in a sports family, and team sports and the spirit of Gadugi as a Cherokee are run through my veins. And I just really believe that when you put people in a room, real or virtual, and you all have a shared sense of what it is you're trying to achieve, you can actually come up with the plan and the strategy to do it, and have the buy-in that those are the right choices to be making and how we spend our time and energy. We just got to get back to it.
That's great to hear. And building on those foundations, that back to basics idea, you've talked a lot about more needs to be done to keep small businesses in their neighborhoods, to keep communities in the neighborhoods that they already live in, not to be priced out by development. There's so many policy pieces that are part of that work. It's very complicated, it's very complex. And your website does specifically mention the needs to support transgender, non-binary folks, LGBTQ plus communities of color, to both preserve and foster new community spaces and economic opportunities. What can the mayor's office do specifically to help achieve some of this?
Well, number one, you have to make it a priority, right? And I have to say that as one of the most exciting things about being mayor is being able to put stakes in the ground and say these are our North Stars, and realizing that we're not a one-dimensional city. We never have been. So we need to quit applying one-dimensional strategies to all the things that we're trying to do. I think when we say something's a priority and we actually focus on it and develop strategies that speak directly to that, and we do it in partnership with the communities that we're trying to serve, we can accomplish great things. LGBTQ business and safe spaces is a really good example of that. I am not an expert, but I know that I want my city to be a place to continue that legacy of Seattle being a place that is open and supportive and invests in the future of our LGBTQ community. The best way for us to do that is to bring folks from the community in to talk specifically about that, whether it's supporting nightlife or arts, or just the LGBTQ youth who are homeless, who don't feel safe in our shelter system today. Well, fine, let's build specifically for them so they feel safe. And how do we do that? We do it in partnership when we say it's a priority, and we work with them to make sure we customize that. Same thing on the business side. I really feel like I'm tired of the stiff arm that the business community has been getting, especially from our city council the last several years. You got to be at the table, right? It's a very simple economic argument. If we want to have revenues at the city for us to reinvest in community solutions and in the future of our working families and creating spaces for our small businesses, you have to be part of the solution because you're helping to fund it. So I want to get back to that and realize, at the end of the day, we're all neighbors, right? We are in Seattle because this is a great place to be. So let's just make sure that we remember that and channel that instead of the negativity that we've been feeling the last few years.
Great. And I want to dig into something you said. You mentioned needing to support LGBTQ homeless youth. And we know that as many as 40% of homeless youth on the street identify as LGBTQ+. In your opening statement, you also said you want to make sure that all tents are off the streets in Seattle. Your website talks about supporting new investments in specifically LGBTQ homeless youth, as well as LGBTQ seniors. What specifically kind of new investments would you try to add to the system here and working with both local community groups and the new Regional Homelessness Authority?
Well, I think again, it comes back to priorities. I think, one of my great frustrations as I peeled back the layers of the onion on our homelessness response is, number one, realizing that we continue to invest really in something that's been building up over the last 20 years is not getting the results that anyone is happy with. Not individuals who are experiencing homelessness and not the rest of us. And so clearly something needs to change. And I think one of the ways it changes is we've got to get more specific about the subpopulations that we are trying to engage. And I say that in my website and other places about intentionality. And I point to things like veterans homelessness. A few years ago, the county, the city, others came together and said, the number of folks who are experiencing homelessness who are veterans is unacceptable. And when we aligned systems and we aligned funding and we had clear outcomes that we were driving toward, we made a demonstrable difference, an impact on the number of homeless veterans. We got to do the same thing and realize that it's, every individual experiencing homelessness, there are different categories of folks. LGBTQ plus is one, youth as well as older. And even within that, you've got folks who are experiencing economic hardship, addiction, whatever the things are, and be just laser focused on that and realize that we've got to be much smarter, data driven, and have very clear outcomes that we're working toward and making sure we have the right partners, the right service providers. If those service providers don't exist, I'll work with the new regional authority to make sure they're funded so we create that capacity in the LGBTQ community so they can actually serve those youth and individuals as a trusted, as a trusted resource and then build those services up that actually meet those needs. That is the best way, and the only way, frankly, I know to help address some of these issues. It's just let's get away from the round peg and square hole thing and just say this is purposely built for you and let's go see if it works. And if it doesn't, we adjust the dials and we try to make it better.
Well, thank you there. And now I want to shift in subject, going back to what you talked about in business climate for small businesses. You've mentioned on your platform that B&O tax relief is something you would like to look into as mayor. And B&O tax relief is something we hear every election cycle. Everyone always brings it up. I don't believe we have ever seen it even proposed. How will you try to actually follow through on that idea?
Well, something about me that a lot of people don't know is, I actually owned a small business for quite a number of years. Was it a huge business? No. But I understand, having been the person to write the checks, what a payroll tax means, what all the other costs are, all the risks associated with owning a business, both sort of the excitement of signing your first lease and the fear of hiring your first employee to deciding when you're going to expand or contract. And realizing, sort of like I will bring that personal experience into this office. And for me, I want Seattle to be a place where small businesses can grow into large corporations if they choose. I want this to be a place where your accountant doesn't say, whatever you do, don't incorporate in Seattle. and realize that that's the real thing, right? Businesses, we had a forum a few weeks ago and there was suggested we should do an exit interview for every business that's leaving Seattle. I don't agree. We want to create every opportunity and every incentive possible for businesses to call Seattle home. And the way we do that is we have to address both the cost and the regulatory environment in Seattle. I fully support going after the B&O tax. If that is something that's going to create opportunities for small businesses who have taken on so much risk and managed to hang on over this past year of the pandemic, that is the right thing for us to do. And it will be at the top of my list, both working locally as well as at the state level. Because for me, it might be a short-term loss in revenue to the city, but it's a long-term gain, right? The more small businesses are thriving and hiring, the more revenues are coming to the city, and the more that we can redistribute that into other programs that are serving the needs we see across our communities. So I am not going to walk away from that. I really believe very strongly in needing to provide that reform and not just keep looking to business to fund all these other things. City of Seattle is a $6.5 billion enterprise. We also got to get smarter about how we're spending our money and make sure that's much more transparent and we're getting the return on investment.
And so digging a little deeper into regulatory environment, you've talked about how you want to realign and streamline city departments so that process doesn't get in the way of progress. As we're coming out of the pandemic, a lot of our businesses have seen wait times for permits extend massively, and especially compared to some of our neighboring cities in the Puget Sound region. What realignments, what streamlining would you suggest from the city of Seattle to help out with that process, that help it so that businesses can emerge from the pandemic as fast as possible?
Well, the best example I could point to is my work at King County. And, their executive Constantine has worked throughout his time in office to really change the management culture and structure of county government and be much more focused on the customer experience. That is not something that we are excelling at the city of Seattle. Having, managed the day-to-day of King County and pushed out that management system across all of our departments, coming to the city was frankly a little shocking to me. I assumed that we were much further down the path in terms of really being centered on a customer experience. And so that's number one, is realigning to just that. What is the customer experience? If you're applying for a permit, if you're receiving services from the city, if you're just calling to complain about something in your neighborhood, I want us to be focused on a customer experience and realize that, we don't want to the city cannot be an impediment to improvement, an impediment to growth in the right way, and but I don't know that we've ever actually said those words out loud. And I can certainly tell you, just having managed some of the day-to-day here for, a little over a year, that system does not exist. And so we've got to realign those processes to be focused on that. We need to be much more data-driven so we understand where we've got bottlenecks and be able to address those issues. Again, have that big table. We have a number of advisory committees, but I think we need to continue to expand that and bring those closer to the mayor's office. So again, there isn't so much space between what the day-to-day of the city government is and the day-to-day of a resident and small business. But I would like us to be very focused on data and outcomes so we can really, make sure that what we say is actually occurring. And look, Seattle is an intense regulatory environment. There's no question about that compared to other jurisdictions. That doesn't mean we can't get better. I think instilling that continuous improvement approach to how government works and having it think more like a business so they can actually talk with businesses in a better way, I think is really key. And again, it was something I was able to help support at King County. And I know it's possible. We just got to do a better job here at the city, especially around permits and the built environment.
Great. And so for our final question today, we know that city government there's a lot going on now, that it's always very challenging. Kind of circling back to some of our first questions, what do you anticipate the biggest barrier will be for you to accomplish your agenda once you're in office?
Well, I think there always are barriers, right? But I really, for me, yet is making sure that we can stay true to just getting back to the basics, and as I said, on my first day as deputy mayor of last year, I should have known I was in for a wild ride when it snowed as I was walking out of the Seattle Municipal Tower with my brand new ID. That might have been a premonition of what was yet to come. But I will say this, no one anticipated we were going to have a global pandemic and be on the front lines of it. But a year later, we are now a fully reopened economy. And we are now focused on recovery and what the future of our city is. That didn't just happen organically. That required partnership. It required the city working with the business community. It required residents to be part of that. It required the mayor's office and the council to work together. And I'm really proud of that work, not just my contribution to it, but us as a city. It really speaks to the value of partnership. And we've got to get back to really understanding that the best things that we can accomplish are done as partners, and realizing that we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Just be focused on progress. And so, I think my biggest challenge will be, trying to really just be the cheerleader or champion for that, maybe sounds overly simplistic approach, but that is what it's going to take for us to break through some of the log jams that we're seeing as a city. And I know a lot has been said throughout the campaign about the relationship between the mayor's office and the city council. Look, I found ways to work with the city council, even in the middle of all of that, even in the middle of all of the, sort of public narrative about that relationship. I found ways to work with city council members. And, again, I think if you sort of take the politics out of it, you take the semantics out of it, you just get down to the brass tacks of we're all in this to try to do something good for our city. And if we stay grounded to that truth, and work together to engage communities across our city, not just pick one over the other, whoever the loudest in the room is, but actually work with those communities that we're trying to serve, which is all Seattle, and just values led, we will be able to meet these challenges and build back Seattle stronger. I know it's possible. We've been here many times before in the city's history. We've always found a way. So let's not forget that. Let's channel that energy into our future.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us, Casey, and good luck on your campaign.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and obviously the work that GSBA does. You're an amazing advocacy organization for your members, and I look forward to having the opportunity to working with you as mayor. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of the summer. Don't forget to vote.